Esto es Narrativas Creativas. Un espacio para hablar de libros, películas, series, juegos de mesa y eventos culturales a través de conversaciones que inspiran y que conectan con la creatividad desde todas sus formas. Muy bien, y aquí estamos en la entrevista ya con el buen Brent Forrester, que qué gusto y honor tenerlo aquí con nosotros. Vamos a hacer la entrevista en inglés, aunque Brent sí habla muy bien español, ¿verdad, Brent?
Bueno, siempre trato de practicar mi español porque estoy aquí en Los Ángeles. Somos una ciudad muy mexicano, muchos aztecas, guanacos, todos chapines. I learned to speak Spanish just from making friends here in LA. Mis padres no hablan español, solo por hablar con los amigos aquí.
That is amazing. And I think it's a great language to talk to friends. You know, I think it's also a great language to, have a relationship or many things, but it's a beautiful, beautiful language. So happy to hear that you know it. Good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. No, and thank you for being here, Brent. And a true honor. We are big fans, and you have created some of the most amazing series and, TV historical stuff. And, from The Office to Simpsons, and you're a writer and you do all kinds of stuff. So let's, without further ado, let's start with our questions, if you don't mind, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Good. All right. My first question is a bit personal, so I'll go. A quick, short question is, why are you who you are? A bit philosophical.
Well, yeah, the answer is I grew up in a house where there was no television. I grew up in what's called West Malibu. It sounds fancy, but it's West Malibu is this remote countryside. When I was growing up, there was no internet, of course. There was no radio reception, no movie theaters. And my mom hated television. She thought that television rotted the brain. And so all I had were books. I read short stories, and that was my entertainment. And so I became a big fan of writing. And writing was my hobby as a little kid. When I was in eighth grade, I won a short story contest and I got $50.
Wow.
And so I said, well, this is it. I'm a professional now. So all through high school and college, I wanted to be a short story writer. And then when I graduated, I became very worried that there was no way to make a living writing short stories.
Okay.
And that's when I pivoted to asking myself, are there other kinds of writing that I could do? I had a friend whose mother was a television writer. She had created a comedy show called The Golden Girls.
Of course, very good one. I used to watch that.
Yeah, it's a great show. And Susan Harris, is a great self-taught genius of comedy dialogue writing. And she became my mentor and taught me how to do this craft and how to pursue the business. But, the reason I like to tell this story is that as a teacher of writers, I love teaching now. And I always say, if you even watched television as a kid, you have more training than I did. I never watched it. If you were ever considered funny as a young person, I wasn't. So, I'm here to share the insight that anybody can learn to be a funny comedy writer. I didn't even start to learn this until after college. And I'm completely self-taught.
Wow, and I love that. I love that, Brent, because we are victims of the same upbringing. I didn't have a television either at home when I was a kid. Only for a couple of years when we lived abroad. So my parents wanted us to learn the language. That the TV show, which was great. But other than that, no TV. But we were given board games, and you want to go travel, we'll support you. And it was a different way of growing up, but I think it made me at least more creative. And in your case, absolutely so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all come from different paths. And obviously, your love of board games comes from your childhood connection to it. My love of writing still comes from, being a little kid sitting in my room. And I still connect to that. But in terms of the craft of comedy, people will tell you that comedy is magic and cannot be taught.
Yeah.
But I am living proof that it can. And how I taught myself was I started watching comedy shows, and every time a line would make me laugh, I would write it down. And then I would analyze it like a surgeon, picking it apart. what's in here? Why is this funny? So I took a very scientific approach to comedy writing, and it worked for me.
Wow.
I don't know any other comedy writers who are this cerebral in their approach to comedy. Most of them are very intuitive,
Yeah.
but it has worked for me, and I found that I'm able to teach other people how to do comedy because of my analytical take on it.
Oh wow, that is amazing. I love the fact that you sort of take the bits that you make you laugh and analyze them. I find that so amazing because I have always wondered, like, why did I laugh at this part and my friend laugh at the other part? That is sort of, I never took that time to really analyze it. I love it. I'm gonna steal that idea from you and we'll take it home. Thank you so much for that answer. And my next question is, a lot of sort of us romantic people have this idea, because me as an author and a writer too, but being a script writer is a whole different story. And my question to you is, how is it really? What's the truth being, a real elite script writer like yourself and sitting in that room doing the work day to day, actually having to produce it, the deadlines? I don't know. Is it all this romantic, amazing thing, or is it harder than it looks?
Well, in television, especially television comedy, you mentioned The Simpsons, The Office, any comedy show that you watch on American television is written by a group of people in a room, a lot like the room that you're in now. Big conference table, bunch of chairs around it, and we write together.
Okay.
And in comedy, the idea is that comedy is very difficult to capture. And you could be in your room writing something that you think is funny. You bring it to people later, it doesn't seem funny anymore.
Yeah.
So in groups, we have that interplay. The sense of playfulness is there in a room. And so we rely on the group process in television. Now, when it's going well, it's the most delightful thing in the world. It's like being at a dinner party with 6 or 8 of the funniest people you've ever met, and everybody's riffing and pitching and playing and imagining. It's extremely creative, extremely enjoyable. The problem becomes, the stress comes from 2 things. One is, you're not just playing, you're working for somebody who's very nervous because they're spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
So the financial pressure can be felt by the people doing this. Oh my God, we got to do this or they're going to go bankrupt. So your career is on the line. And the second issue is the time pressure. So in American television, we historically have written 22 episodes of television a year. And that means we have to write quickly. In fact, if you think about it, the people who are paying us to write, they don't want us to have too much time. They don't want to overpay us. So if this can take a week to do, they don't want to give us 2 weeks. They want to give us 1 week. Maybe they want to give us less than a week, right? So they've figured out to give you exactly the bare minimum amount of time to do the job. And that means you are always a little sweaty under the armpits, like, Jesus Christ, is it that late already? We got to go, go, go. The financial pressure and the time pressure can create stress. And it's a tricky thing in the creative fields because creativity thrives when people are relaxed.
Yeah.
Creativity shuts down when people are afraid.
Sure.
And so as a leader of creative people, I typically get hired to be the head writer. I sit where you are at the head of the table and everybody's looking at me. And I have to create a feeling of like, hey, everything's great. We're good. This is fun. No problem. In order to get the people relaxed enough to create. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, we've got 45 minutes until the table read. We're all going to get fired. So I have to be a bit of an actor, pretending that everything is great, even if I'm feeling like we're in trouble.
Wow, that is great, and thank you for that, insight. And I think it, as in life and everywhere, is that if you find that click, that chemistry, anything can happen. And telling jokes, I always use that as an example. You're surrounding a table with knowns or unknowns, and the jokes just start rolling, and everybody one tells jokes, and that reminds the other guy of the other joke, and it just goes on forever, and it's magical. And I think that when it happens, it's so amazing.
Yes. That's the job. When it works well, that's the way it feels, is that collaborative, creative joy. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I love it. Hopefully I'll sit on that table one day soon. And I know you mentioned, and I know this for a fact, that you spend a lot of time and passion to teaching, making new generations learn about script writing. And my question to you is, how do you accomplish that? What you said, like, my question is, how do you accomplish that they understand that comedy is not an accident, that is actually engineerable, it's something you can study and analyze like you do yourself. How do you get them to understand that it's not just born skill, but that you actually can work on it?
Well, I love to bring young writers together and lead them through the process.
Okay.
One thing that I've been doing with students lately is I just recreate the writer's room that I've worked in, and we can do it online. I'll do a Zoom meeting. I'll get 5 people online, and I'll guide them through the process. One thing that is really fun to show students of writing is that you can write dialogue very quickly if you get into the mind of the improv actor. So, you have actors, and then you have improv actors, the ones that improvise. The improv actors are trained to get into character and then just say whatever comes out of their mouth. If you get into that kind of a mindset, you can write dialogue very quickly. And in fact, when you write dialogue quickly, the way an improv actor just lets it come out like this, oftentimes the dialogue is very good. It will feel real and authentic by virtue of the fact that you're creating it quickly. If you think about it, if you read a play, and you say, my God, that dialogue seems so real. It seems so natural. How did this writer create this natural, real sounding dialogue? Well, real dialogue, natural dialogue, the way people actually talk is very unpolished. It's frequently unsophisticated. We repeat words. We use the wrong word. Our grammar is off. Okay? As a writer of short stories, I was always trying to polish my sentences and make them perfect. As a writer of dialogue, I do the opposite. I write quickly, let it be flawed, and then look at how real and natural that seems. So that's a trick that I can share with any writer, is be spontaneous and trust that it may come out better than you think.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, absolutely, I agree, because I've been always as a writer myself, as an author myself, is the brain goes faster than you can type. So I've been using other tools that let's record your voice, and that way turn it into words, and it kind of doesn't work. And then AI came along, and hey, it can type for me. But I realized very quickly that it started fixing my text, making it grammatically correct. I was like, no, that is exactly what I don't want. Yes. But it's a whole business there where you can go. But I love the fact that you sort of keep it playful and you sort of keep it honest and human. I find that fascinating and very unique, actually.
Yes, we're all thinking a lot about AI, and the writers are very worried about AI. We had a big strike, the writers' strike out here.
I remember.
Yeah, in great part, it was people were worried that the studios were just going to hire AI writers instead of human writers. So we were very worried about that. I've become less worried because the more I watch movies and film and read books and listen to music that I love, the common denominator is always a sense that there's a human being back there trying to share something with me. And AI cannot do that. The first lesson that I got in comedy came from the creator of the Golden Girls, Susan Harris. She was a self-taught genius of writing. Yeah. And she said to me, the secret of comedy is write about what is difficult for you, even painful, and trust that it will come out funny. Yeah. It's always been the North Star that I guide myself with. I think, what is difficult for me? What is painful? How can I make that funny? Yeah. AI cannot ever know what is painful. It doesn't have feelings. And so for that reason alone, I think it will never be able to do anything but imitate what a great artist like you or me or the artists we love do. It can imitate, but it can never create art that we care about because it can't feel.
I agree. Actually, absolutely. I agree with you. And we got to be honest with ourselves and just keep going, keep laughing. I think life will find a way, as it always does, also in comedy. So absolutely. And my last question before we go to some quick questions. You joined, for example, one of my favorite series of all time, The Simpsons, and you joined in a time where many consider it was at the top of its game. What was it that you had at that stage of life that, you know, all these episodes like, you know, Homer Palooza or Lemon of Troy, they are still relevant 30 years later. I find that fascinating. What was the magic that you brought along there to accomplish this?
Thank you very much. I'm very proud of those episodes, and I am amazed that they still do work. And, you know, part of it was the very high standard of quality that we had on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
The entire writing staff, every single writer when I was there was a graduate of Harvard University, except for me. I was the one guy. I was from Columbia University, a different Ivy League school. I like to say it was 100% white men from Harvard, and then me, I was a white man from Columbia, so I was the diversity hire that year. Anyway,
yeah, I remember
embarrassing.
Conan O'Brien mentioned this Harvard bit. I remember him saying this, when he was writing there.
I mean, it was the smartest people in America in some ways. By the way, it's very embarrassing that there were no women and no minorities on that staff. Now they would never allow that, thank God. Sure. But you know, regardless of the ethnic makeup of the group, they were smart and they had an incredibly high standard of quality. Wow. If you look at the just number of jokes per minute in a Simpsons episode in the golden era, it was 2 or 3 times higher than any other show on TV.
I agree.
We had all of these kind of internal rules. You could never do a joke that was similar to a joke that you had ever heard before. Oh, wow. If you did, it was considered terribly embarrassing. Oh my God, I've heard that before. Oh, that's terrible. But the word hacky was used. Oh, that's hacky. Hacky was the most awful thing you could hear. So originality was very important. Density of jokes was very important. And then I think there was something, you know, in the early Simpsons especially, there was something in the DNA of the show that came from James L. Brooks, who was one of the creators of the show. Now, James Brooks, you may know, he created a TV show called Taxi. He did Mary Tyler Moore. He directed the movie Broadcast News, Terms of Endearment. He's one of the greatest comedy creators of all time. And his style relies heavily on real human emotion. And he imported that priority into this animated show, which was unusual. It's just a cartoon, and yet it had this high priority on somewhere in the subtext, there's real emotion happening, real love of family, real anxiety about supporting your loved ones, etc. Yeah. And so I think that does help the sense that there's, even though it's a silly cartoon, something deeper happening in the subtext.
Not silly at all. I love it. I love it personally, and I know many people who also do. So that's amazing. Thank you so much, Brent. We'll take a little break, and we'll be right back with you. We are back. Aquí estamos de regreso. Qué gusto. Te voy a pasar la palabra para que hagas unas preguntas a Brent, por favor.
Muchas gracias, Tero. Es un gusto conocerte, Brent. Y tengo aquí algunas preguntas. Son unas preguntas para contestar de manera corta. Son varias. Veremos cuántas podemos contestar, cómo nos va con el tiempo. La primera es, en la serie de Office, Steve lanzaba normalmente muchas bombas de improvisación todo el tiempo. Como productor y director, ¿cuál era el truco para que el resto del elenco no rompiera el personaje y se riera en su cara? ¿O hubo alguna escena que casi no se pudo terminar porque la improvisación de Michael era simplemente demasiado estúpida, por así decirlo, para procesarla?
Well, you know, Steve Carell was famous amongst other improv comedians as being the best improv comedian of his generation. Certainly one of them. But the thing about Steve is he's a very serious actor. If you were to meet him on set, he's often the most serious guy there. He was intimidating to the writers, not because of his personality, but because of his intelligence. Steve Carell understood the character of Michael Scott more deeply than any of us as writers did. And so we would write for him and just kind of hope that he would say, yes, that's something Michael would say. And many times he would read the writing and he'd say, no, Michael wouldn't say that. And we'd say, okay, sorry, we'll try again. So he was intimidating that way. Yes, there's a lot of times where if you go on YouTube, you can see Steve making the other people laugh. And they all did that. The actors loved working with each other so much, and they would get deep into a scene and sometimes be unable to continue because they would make each other laugh so much. But the funny thing about The Office, it's only about 15% improvised. Any episode that you watch, it homes very closely to the written script, but there was always a little bit of room for play there. For you experts in television production, The Office is a mockumentary. It's imitating a documentary. And what that means is in documentary, you often have two cameras. These are cameras, two cameras shooting at the same time. Yeah. What that means is we can get two actors, one of them improvising and the other reacting at the same time. And that is really, really helpful for improv. If we were shooting with a single camera, we'd get improv, and then we'd have to remember what this guy's reaction is when we do the next take. So this mockumentary style goes perfectly with improv and was perfectly suited to great improv stars like Steve Carell.
Gracias. Por ejemplo, todos tenemos un Dwight o Angela en nuestra oficina. Pero, ¿cuál es el secreto para tomar un tipo común de oficina y convertirlo en un personaje icónico sin que deje de sentirse real?
What a great question. It's worth remembering that the American Office came from the British Office.
Of course.
And the British Office was created by Ricky Gervais, who created a character called David Brent, who later becomes Michael Scott. As I understand it, David Brent was based on a real guy that Ricky Gervais worked for. It was a guy who thought he was funny and wasn't, who thought he was popular and wasn't. And because he was the boss, nobody could tell him the truth. And it was infuriating to Ricky Gervais, and so he created this character. When I'm teaching writing, I always urge writers, look at the people in your world. Observation is the best place to find characters. If anybody ever makes you angry, infuriates you, frustrates you, that's a good place to go for a common character, right?
I know. Characters, not only characters, but stories. I mean, yes, everyday life is the best stories there can be.
Oh, absolutely. One of the hit shows in America was called Everybody Loves Raymond. If you ever see that show. So that was run by Phil Rosenthal. Now, apparently, every Monday, Phil Rosenthal would say to the writers, okay, who had a fight with their wife over the weekend?
Oh, I love it.
Okay. Tell me the story, and that would become an episode.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right.
Well, Larry David, of course, Seinfeld. It's also very, very much his own life and experiences, with a twist, of course, but I love it. That is fantastic.
¿Qué es lo que más te enorgullece cuando la gente menciona tu trabajo?
I wrote an episode of The Office called Business School, and it's three stories. One is Michael goes and teaches at a business school, and he thinks he's going to be celebrated, and he's humiliated. There's a bat in the office with Jim and Dwight, and then Pam has an art show, her first display of her art, and it's also a failure. That episode is the most beloved of all the episodes of TV that I've written because of the ending. It's a comedy, but the ending is touching. Yeah. Pam feels like a failure, and then Michael, who also feels like a failure, sees her painting, loves it, and buys it. And this moment where two people who are feeling terrible about themselves have a moment of connection was so touching that it ended up being, my favorite episode of all time. For me, it was about being an artist. It was about making art and hoping that people will love it, and then that crushing disappointment when for some reason it fails. And everyone who's an artist has felt that. Including Jenna Fisher, who played Pam. She, as an actress, had been rejected so many times. And so it was me writing about being an artist and Jenna portraying being an artist and that heartbreak that we managed to communicate. That's my proudest moment.
Wow. And I'm honestly, and this is no fake, I remember that episode very well. And it is for something, for a reason. It was so different than all the other episodes. It really felt it. So thank you so much. We just wanted to close with you, Brent. We would love to talk with you for hours, but let us know, how can people find your classes? We're interested in learning more about script writing or talking with you or listening to you. Where can we find you?
Thank you for saying that. It's easy to find me. Just go to brentforrester.com. That's where all my classes are. I teach maybe 2-4 times a year online. It's super cheap. Okay. I remember being an artist and having no money, so I make it as cheap as possible.
Wow.
My reason for being on Earth is to encourage other artists to get their validation. I remember what it's like to feel like maybe I have something to contribute and I want to prove it. And now my job is to help other artists find that validation. So reach out to me, write me an email, sign up, and I hope to see you in class. Nothing makes me happier than encouraging my fellow artists.
Oh, that is beautiful, Brent. Thank you so much. So brentforrester.com. We'll put it on the show notes and invite people to join. This has been a pleasure. I mean, Brent, this is a true honor to meet you. Let's stay in touch. And thank you so much for sharing so much insight and learnings here. And we are very proud to have had you here today.
Un placer para mí también, un honor, mucho gusto encontrar a ustedes, amigos. Sí, llámame, escríbame. I hope we can be friends for a long time. Great to meet you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Ben. Ha sido un placer, tal como dijo Tero, y pues esperamos verte aquí de nuevo. Muchas gracias.
Great.
Esto fue Narrativas Creativas. Un espacio para hablar de libros, películas, series, juegos de mesa y eventos culturales a través de conversaciones que inspiran y que conectan con la creatividad desde todas sus formas.